taking a critical look at the gaming news of the week. This is Augmented Reality, presented by the Triple S League.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Augmented Reality podcast for January 11th, 2019. My name is Asheninity, and this is your source for news, leaks, and insights about games and the gaming industry. It is the Friday edition of the show. I'm here as always with Subsidian, who we're having... we're going to need the refs to go under the hood and take a look at the replay footage on which of us actually answered that question in the live chat first. You'll have to let us know. On my screen, my answer is first. On his screen, his answer is first. Although it seems like the verdict is in that I actually answered the question first, probably by like a micron of a second.
No, see what happens is that YouTube scans all comments and chats except for the ones put out by the official account. So I definitely answered first. It's just, you know, it took 0.5 seconds for mine to be filtered, whereas it didn't take that 0.5 seconds.
See, okay,
for
this
you
is
to be
the
filtered.
This is the YouTube chat version of you saying, "The sun was in our eyes. It's not fair." Anyway.
Yeah, sure.
Based on which side of the field we were on. Anyway, enough sports analogies because I suck at them. If you're listening live today, please say hello in the live chat and send us your questions and comments there as well. We'll read and respond to as many as we can throughout the podcast. And don't forget to slam that like button. If you do it now, you don't have to remember to do it later. You can always unslam it if you turns out you don't like the podcast. Just saying.
Yeah,
anyway,
if you said something that grievously offended you, then I mean, by sure, by all means. So yeah. Oh my, this broke yesterday. We were almost like gonna do a live show yesterday to cover it, because this is big news. This is huge news. This is huge news for. This is huge news for a couple different things. It's huge news for Activision, it's big news for Blizzard, and it's also huge news, obviously, for Bungie. This is not the first time Bungie has done this, though. They used to be in bed with Microsoft, and they jumped ship there and ran over to Activision. So basically, Bungie is like that. You know, that one person in your friends clique who's dated pretty much everybody. Yeah. Yeah, that's that person. I don't know how much you want to trust that person going forward.
It's like the person who's dated and having babies with everybody you know, apparently.
But in this case, I mean, you could kind of say it was kind of like a bad relationship for Bungie in both of those relationships. This was like obviously like pre-current gen Xbox, Microsoft, which was that was just like there were monkeys running that institution. And when I say monkeys, I don't mean like people, you know, acting like monkeys or monkeying around. I mean, they literally had a bunch of chimpanzees in a cage at the zoo who had access to a keyboard, and it just reacted whenever they threw crap at each other. So that's basically kind of more or less. Am I making it clear enough that Microsoft, you know, back in just not too long ago was a completely inept studio run by a bunch of people who don't understand video games, period? Am I getting that point across, or is it being lost on something?
I think you're making your point, even though chimpanzees are apes and not monkeys.
Zoo animals could have done a better job at running that company and like putting out this last console, and it's like they went from number 1 to arguably number 3 in a single generation, because apparently they don't know how to do maths. Which
doesn't sound bad until you realize there are only 3 major consoles.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, and just like, and they had a lead of like 6 years on the Nintendo one.
That is true, yeah. And
so
and
they
on
had
PlayStation.
this massive lead.
Not PlayStation. Sorry, I got that backwards. But yeah.
Yeah. And they just ran it into the ground. Like, seriously, one of the worst companies ever. So I don't blame Bungie from wanting to get out from their shadow. But I definitely don't blame them for wanting to get out of Activision's shadow, because Activision gets Activision's done about as much damage to the game industry as EA has. It's just they've never been like called out for it. Like they've never been given the crap for it that they deserve. Activision is not a friendly company to companies that it partners up with. It's killed a lot of publishers. It's done enormous damage to a lot of brands. It's sunk a lot of IPs through various shady business dealings. It has most certainly rushed a lot of games out the door, and you can really see that in the latest Destiny game. Like I mean, all of those microtransactions, all of that stuff, that was on them 100% all the way through. Yeah, it's rough. Now, this is on the heels of several big stories which we've covered. You know, the two CFOs leaving both Blizzard and Activision. They've had a variety of other issues come up recently with some staffing issues that have come out, and so I can personally attest to this one in particular. Blizzard and Activision and EA are all abusive places to work. And we talked a little bit about this on Tuesday, but basically it's like when it's your job to look at a market full of young, impressionable kids, mostly, and go, how can we manipulate these kids into spending as much money on video games, spending as much time in video games, and then in some cases actively taking their parents' credit card information, entering it in, making a whole bunch of microtransactions, and then not giving that money back just cause. When you are a company that deals with that thrives on that kind of an environment, you're not going to have too many morals, and people who do have morals, or people who do have they have, like, code of conduct, they're not going to be exactly going up the ranks in your company. They're going to be few and far between, if any of them exist there at all. And what we know, and what I've known for a long time at Blizzard, which I have a lot of stories about, is that it is an extremely cliquish, very, very, it's like high school. It really is. There are certain people, there are certain lead developers who, the vast majority of them, do not work there anymore. In fact, I think I don't want to get too specific, so I'll try and keep it as general as I can. So there are a number of high-ranking, what you might say, founders, who have left the company because there are certain other high-ranking original team members that are basically just children, like not the fun kind, that you go to Chuck E. Cheese with and you have fun as a kid. The kind that bullies you, steals your lunch money, puts you in locks you in a locker, who thinks it's funny to crap on you and give you swirlies. Give you swirlies and just do things that are not fun.
Not that ever happened to me or anything, but yeah. There's some hilarious stories that I have very good information on, and one or two events that I can personally attest to, where certain leads screamed certain things during certain meetings about certain development stages of video games, and these were things that were really silly to get mad about, to get angry about. I'll give you a quick hint. So this is kind of an interesting one. Originally, the Trinity system in World of Warcraft was actually supposed to be a lot more encompassing. There were supposed to be more tanks in the game. Now, if you go and you kind of really go through if you really kind of go through some of the early code, I'm not talking 1.2 or anything like
like deep into the release. I'm talking like the first like couple months. So like if you can get your hands on, there's some records that have it on the original like first 10 patch updates since WoW went live, like the early ones. We're talking like the first couple of like months of World of Warcraft in its early stages. There were a lot of items in the game that were designed to let more than just the warrior class tank. And there were lots of talents that were designed to let other characters tank. There was two clothies, and then there were two male, and two plate wearers that were all meant to be tanks, that were all designed to be tanks. However, at one of these meetings, a certain someone got up, threw a water pitcher across the room, and said, basically, there's only one tank, and that's the blankety blank blank warrior, and you blankety blank blank blanks don't know the first thing when it comes to blankety blank blank. I made blankety blank 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 craft. You can go blank 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 yourself. I'll give you a hint. That guy still works there, okay? Everybody else in that room does not work there. And
well, I can see why. I'm curious how you know about this, but anyway, I won't ask.
One or two of them will have referenced this particular event once or twice before. And it wasn't until the next expansion that we got we got legitimate actual tanks that were outside of the singular class. Now that's a funny one, and it's kind of sad, and it's kind of really messed up in a lot of ways. But it goes to show you that the primary issue at Blizzard and at Activision is that there are people in charge there who they like to do and say certain things, and they like to run the company a certain way. And anybody who gets in the way of that basically gets thrown out on their ear. And you can see this with this recent complaint about, the guy came out and talked about how he was basically like I was systematically abused at his work environment. Now there's some people who are saying, I don't believe that story, but I've been on the receiving end, and I've seen a lot of this kind of stuff happen in the workplace before. I am in a scientifically provable group that is routinely bullied. It hasn't really affected me for a number of years now, but it's something that I've seen quite a bit, and I can tell you that people who are on the receiving end of that, they don't do the things that this one guy is doing. They don't say the one things the guy is saying, and if they're liars, and if they are liars, they're not like you can dig them out. Like there are a handful that are there's some really good liars out there, but in this particular case, like if he was like full of crap, it would be pretty obvious by now. And there's lots of people digging into this. There's a lot of fanboys who are trying to destroy his reputation even now, because how dare you insult anybody at Blizzard? Don't you know everybody at Blizzard is the incarnation of the pure goodness of the gaming industry? How dare you insinuate or suggest that there is not the greatest level of skills in dealing with stuff, especially when there's a bent that somebody can get on, or I'm trying to avoid getting political, but especially when there's certain things that people can lean towards, that stuff is going to happen. It's just going to happen. And it's not like they didn't know, or this went under the radar. I mean, the guy was given, multiple time offs. He was, he had a right to, basically take the company to court. But he waited too long for one of these things, because there's certain things that companies can't do. It's like if you go on medical leave or something like that, you can't be fired while you're on medical leave. That's just not kosher. that's just not cool. Like in general, like that's both illegal and morally wrong. It's like, yeah, not the greatest. Like it's and why, I don't even know why, because it's not like you're paying the person, unless you have a really really good benefits package. In which case, if you do, then what does it matter? It's like duh. Yeah. So, anyways, that basically kind of sums up what kind of like the inner workings of a lot of these bigger companies are, and you get more of that the more the company is not interested in catering not interested in doing their best that they possibly can for the audience, for their consumers, for their gamers. The more you have, dirty, filthy companies, the more these issues start poking up. Why? Because it's very much a cultural thing of like, again, if you're more than willing to go around and do things that are, shady, that most of us would go, I couldn't really sleep well after, doing this or setting this up inside a video game or selling a red dot to my players. That's just way too scummy for me. I can't do it. I'm not going to make a call for it. It's just, the buck stops here, and we're going to refuse to do this because this is just crossing the line. If you don't have the gumption of doing that, then, these kinds of issues are going to, they're going to reach into the entirety of what you do all the time, into every corner and facet of your work, into every corner of your community and the way that you interact with people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So really long-winded and a little bit passionate, I guess. But because I've been on the receiving end of this more than one occasion, and it's not cool. It's not like, this is like, seriously, like.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Blizzard and Activision do seem to be hemorrhaging employees right now.
Well, I mean, partially because they're handing off. Well, they're hemorrhaging employees both from the offer, hey, leave and we'll pay out you, a year's extra bonus page. They're hemorrhaging a lot of employees like that. They're also hemorrhaging a lot of like people higher up, and this is kind of the next bit of the story. So both the CFOs and then the previous head of Blizzard. Now he left, but he was still, quote unquote advisor. Yeah, so but now he's resigned from that even as well. He's basically gone like, no, we're making a complete cutoff here. And why does this happen right around the same time as all this other stuff is starting to come out? I think it's because, certain skeletons in the closet are starting to get out and starting to say, hey, things are not swell here. Which, I mean, years ago, in that earlier story, that kind of stress, that kind of like getting mad, that kind of throwing things around and arguing with people, that's pretty normal, especially for an industry that's, high stress and where you're working on things and you're arguing about what the best thing to do in these scenarios are. I'm not saying that that's not something that you can expect, or that that you should be, you should always expect the Tower of London tea room, perspective, where it's all like, oh, good day talking to you all, and I really disagree with you on that, but I'll be more than willing to acquiesce to your request.
Yeah, sure, but there are limits to acceptable professional behavior, right?
And that's what I'm saying, is that there's, for a long time there was lots of back and forth. I mean, the amount of back and forth, the amount of people who got upset and yelled at each other during the whole saga of that StarCraft Ghost game that was supposed to come out. That thing had been developed like 5 times at Blizzard and never got shipped ever. The amount of stuff and frustration that went around with that title alone, I mean, it's huge. It's just massive. That was a massive problem on so many levels. There was so much stuff going in and around with that. It was kind of crazy. So yeah, it's it has issues, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, butting heads is not a bad thing, but this is different. This is like, hey, you know that guy over there? Yeah. Well, I hear he's got like, he had a mental breakdown. Cool. Let's make fun of him next time he's here. It's like that's not being, business like aggressive and, doing the best that you can to make the best product that you can. That's just being a complete piece of crap. Like that's not anything less than you are a terrible person in general. It's like, hey, let's make fun of the guy who's got a mental deficiency. It's like, yeah, because we're totally like, a bunch of again, we had that list of words that you can't say on YouTube to keep it monetized, and I keep trying to remember which words I can and can't say. Not that I'm overly interested in censoring myself, but if I can come up with a better word for being a bonehead than, saying something else that's kind of similar to that, then, that's probably a good thing. Mm-hmm. And it's also more comedic because it's like who says bonehead anymore anyways? It's hilarious. So yeah, that overall, it's like this is all starting to come out, and I don't think we've seen the end of it. I think we're going to see a couple more things over the next couple of months. I suspect that we might see some more people coming out talking about their time there. And what I think it basically boils down to is that the people who used to run the tight ship, who used to go out of their way to make sure that that the products were good, and that there was some balance towards the more aggressive people at the office, so to speak. Speaking of office, imagine if the whole company was run by a bunch of Dwights. It's like, yeah, you could never, if you weren't a Dwight, you could never survive at a company completely run by Dwights from the office. And that's exactly what's kind of going on here. And I feel that more and more of just those people are left, running the show there.
If you don't have a Jim, who's got your back?
Yeah. All the gyms have left, all the gyms have gone,
gyms have left.
And there's no Pams there anymore, and the crazy Michael guy is gone, and now you're just left with a bunch of like people that are basically Dwights, and they're just kind of making a mess of things, and I feel that's what's going on at Activision. Like, it's.
By the way, chat is really loving your impressions. Crazy Joyce's. Sibes impersonations is all I live for. So we better keep them up. But anyway, yeah, let's bring it back to Bungie here and just talk about what's happening there. So Bungie and Activision had a deal for publishing Destiny games. Anyway,
yeah, they had over a 10-year deal, and Bungie's walked out well over 2 years before that was supposed to be completed.
Right. But they are taking the Destiny IP with them. Like they have gained publishing rights to the Destiny franchise. So they can keep on developing it. They can self-publish more things in the Destiny from the Destiny IP.
They learned their lesson from when they lost Halo.
Yeah.
They lost Halo because they didn't hold on to that, and by the time they wanted to leave Microsoft, Halo was essentially a multi-billion-dollar industry. There's no way they can afford to take that IP with them. We talked about this on Tuesday with kind of how it is with both Obsidian and how EA and BioWare, their relationships have been set up, and how Obsidian has set up their relationship with Microsoft. It's like, if you're smart, you don't give away all of your IPs. If you're really good, you don't give away any. You just say, we're going to have this deal, and this deal will last as long as we can, and we're just going to have to get some trust here and do this. And this is definitely going to burn. Like, this is definitely burnt Activision. They as much as the fact that they Destiny has been struggling the last the last year and a half, is really been struggling since its release.
Destiny 2, yeah.
Yeah, there was there was this article where they talked to a whole bunch of people from Destiny and said, from Bungie, and said, how do you think your game is shaping up? And they're like, we're really happy with the work that we've done on it, and especially with this latest expansion here, we felt that this is exactly where we want to be. And then you talk to Activision, and Activision's, yeah, we're a little disappointed with the performance. It's like,
Stay Faceless in the chat here sort of sums that up well. Says, generally, devs care about the state of the game more than the publishers who care about the bottom dollar. It's the difference between wanting to be known for good games or successful games. And yes, this developer-publisher dichotomy can be a big problem. We see this. I mean, we see this with EA all the time. And we see this with Bungie getting burned by Microsoft with the Halo IP, and then so in this case they managed to retain their IP. And actually, I've been curious since this announcement was made. I've been curious what leverage did Bungie have to keep that IP?
So basically, I don't know any of the interiors like I do with Obsidian. I know a lot more with the whole Obsidian deal than I do with this one. Partially because this was like 8 years ago, and I wasn't as connected back then as I am now. So this boils down to just kind of looking at it logically. They lost their IP for Halo. They lost it because they didn't make a good deal. They didn't make a smart deal. Mm-hmm. They made a deal that was based on them essentially securing total funding for the duration of like several years. In this case, what they've done here is obviously they said, no, we're going to retain all our rights to this. And if we decide to walk out early because you're not supporting us, or you're not doing this, or you're making us release games in a bad state, then we have a right to pull this out, and then also pull out the publishing rights as well.
Mm-hmm. So you figure this was in their contract from
the
beginning.
This was 100% in their contract. They probably had a kill code written into the contract. Probably both companies did, and they sat on it and said and I honestly think that this latest wave of stuff that's been going on, this has been in the works for a while. I need to make this clear. There's a lot of people saying, Bungie saw the latest news and they decided to split. No, this has been this kind of clause inside the system, and being able to separate it without having to go to court over it. This is like probably anywhere between a 6 to a 12-month notice that they would have had to have given. And I think probably what happened is that after the release of Destiny 2 and all of the controlling insanity that Activision kept on doing and kept on stepping into, that I think right around probably right around the release of the latest expansion, they said, you know what, basically, like, this isn't working for us, and I think we're just gonna call this quits. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of I think that's probably what happened. So this got released in September of 2018. So I think probably prior to that, or maybe around that time, I think basically, Scott over at Bungie there was basically like, there's just too much. There's just too much, meddling that Activision's doing, and this is hurting our brand. This is hurting our name. This is hurting our future. So go ahead and pull that death clause. Mm-hmm. And so they went in, and they probably had a big meeting about it in the boardroom with all of the Bungie heads and all the studio heads, and they probably milled it around their head and said, yeah, I think the best thing for us to do is probably walk. And this was probably which means that this decision was made while the Activision stock was going through the roof. And they said at that point, look, we're not interested in this anymore. Because they probably made this decision in September. And then it was the fallout in October that caused that to happen. There's a good chance that it may have even been started ahead of time, but clearly it was the fact that something within the Forsaken during that time period, something caused something to click, and they decided at some point that no, they're done with
Right.
Activision, that it's just too much, and they said, we're out of here, and Activision could say nothing about it because Bungie had learned from the previous lesson that they had to have that kill code embedded in the project. And
Interesting.
they had to have done that.
And most of the response I've seen to this has been positive. A lot of people think this is going to be good for the Destiny franchise. Time will tell, but a lot of people are remaining positive about this, especially with some of the bad will that Activision has garnered. Crazy Joy wants to know, did we see this coming, especially Cyb? Now, one quick caveat. I mean, I don't think we were really paying attention to what Activision and Bungie were doing.
I wasn't. I'm not. Bungie's one of the companies that, like, I like their games. I like Halo, but I haven't played Halo in a very, very long time. Destiny is kind of interesting, but it's exclusively first person, and I just can't do it. So it's not something that is typically on my radar.
It wasn't high on our priority list of things to be looking at. But
now, I've known for a while that Activision's going to be running into a wall here, and we saw this as. In fact, I'm just shocked that it hasn't happened sooner. Like, I am continually shocked that Activision hasn't. Like I said, Activision is a bad company to get into bed with. Any developer who has worked with them either has no control over the company, or has had things stripped away from them slowly, or has had this slow, passive, somewhat hostile takeover that they can't stop. And I think Bungie is the only one who's going to get out of it unscathed. I think Blizzard is going to probably end up getting into a lot of trouble. Because at this point, there's more Activision in Blizzard than there is Blizzard in Activision. And definitely more... Blizzard right now is definitely far less than the Blizzard that it was 4 years ago, 5 years ago. I think overall that yes, I've been seeing this coming for a long time.
Aren't they? Aren't Activision and Blizzard the same? Sorry,
they are. They're like partner companies.
Like, I thought they had merged under the same name.
Well, they merged under the same name of Activision Blizzard.
Right. But they're still
still separate companies.
Okay.
In the sense of, like, so.
Whereas Bungie had a publishing contract with them, but they didn't merge in the same way.
Yeah. So Activision, Blizzard, and Bungie all have their own CFOs. They all have their own CEOs. They all have their own presidents and board of directors. They all have their own living identity. If you don't have any of that, then you're not. You are the same company. Period. If you don't have your own financial structure, then you are just, you're just a different wing of the same company. Activision and Blizzard are a little bit different. That doesn't mean that there weren't people who could take a job at Activision and they get transferred over to Blizzard, and then vice versa, and all this kind of stuff. But over the past few years, they've been siphoning off more people into Blizzard from Activision, who are making certain calls in certain things and pushing the company to do certain things that make them less and less appealing to us gamers. And have been making more and more terrible decisions. One of the key things there is when Overwatch came out, they said, hey, look how much money we can make by doing Overwatch that has basically a single mode to it. Like, the game had one bloody mode for like almost a year, and that was it. And it's just the same 4 minutes of gameplay that you get every time you play a match. It's like it's fun for a little while. I have no idea how people can go on that for long periods of time. This coming from me after having put 1,000 hours into League of Legends. Yeah. There's
well, to each their own thing, right? But obviously there are a lot of people who are still playing it.
I'm not. I can't insult it. I can't insult the gameplay. But what I'm saying there is basically like Blizzard has, been told by Activision, hey, you need to make more money. You need to do this. Make more games like things that we can highly monetize, like and get people make a second WoW because it's better to have that 2 to 4 to 10 to 16 million players, and then rather than having that slope off over time, they would just prefer to cut it off right there and then put out another thing that moved all the people over to that thing. So there's a lot of forces at play here that are unhealthy to gaming in general. It's like we want more disposable TV dinner kind of games and less games that you can sink your teeth into. Like, there's a lot of companies out there that look at Skyrim and say that's a terrible game. Why is it a terrible game? Oh, because you sell a bunch of copies, but then you don't keep the customer coming back for more and more and more and more. What you should have done is had it be real popular for a year or two, resell a couple different new versions of it, and then you should be putting out another game of the thing, and then you should be putting out another game and another game and another game and another game.
Could that be why so many are looking at this mobile format and going,
Yeah, well, I mean, mobile is if you want to make a lot of money
on
mobile's
essentially disposable games. Yeah. So I want to get to some of the chat comments here, and then we'll move on to other things. But yeah, interesting stuff. So Notional says something that I think I pointed out. We had a bit of a debate about this last time, or recently, when we were discussing Fallout 76. What's the point of a successful game if it breaks goodwill and destroys consumer trust? It will hurt them later on, even if they do pull off a good game. I'm inclined to agree, but as Stay Faceless says, money is the answer to that question. They want the money. What is goodwill worth in dollar signs? And I mean, both really good points. I do tend to agree that your reputation as a developer is very important in the long run.
And this is really important to point out. Overall, and I cannot stress this enough, Activision and EA, it's not like you have to be an idiot to not see that these two companies were pushing the same kind of stuff in the same direction at the same time. Why? Because they want to push all gaming into that prospect of basically being, the type of mobile games that you have. Because then that means that they can milk everybody constantly. And that there will be no other game that's standing out and saying, no, we're not going to do this. And the companies that do that do go out of their way to say, no, sorry, we're not interested in this. There's significant, what's the best way to put it? Corporate espionage. There's a lot of corporate espionage that's interested in nothing but taking down companies who aren't willing to push that new level of microtransactions and forced content, controlled content, or however you want to say it. There's interest in a lot of those companies to say, yeah, you know what, we're just going to say no to you. We're just going to make it so that you can't publish your stuff, that we're going to make it hard. We're going to play, we're going to get after you. We're going to cause problems. We're going to cause troubles if you do this. And I mean, not to get overly conspiratorial, but we've already seen a little bit of that, even though the story was a little shaky. So the story which we reported on earlier, which we did talk about this at the time, I believe, unless I'm crazy. The whole story with oh crap, what's that game called? That Cyberpunk 2D game last night. So last night has had a lot of some of it is a little bit of fake news. Some of it's more accurate than what some people are putting out there. It's a little bit different. No, they haven't been completely, run out of money and hitting walls and stuff like that. But they are having a hard time. Why are they having a hard time? Because there's an active level of interest in keeping that kind of a game with that kind of a director, with that kind of a person at the helm. Why you would want to keep that person on a leash, to put it as bluntly as possible. There are reasons why you want to keep people on a short leash that would dare disrupt your income levels. So you go out of your way to make sure that anybody who's trying to get hired there, or anybody who's trying to support the game, or anybody who's trying to send funding their way, that they're all put in their place, so to speak. And if you think that this doesn't happen in the gaming industry, well, you're an idiot, because I mean, this has been happening in this is part of this is basically just business. This is the way the business works. And this is why there's laws on the book for antitrust in countries where, we've seen what happens when, if you really want a good experience of this, go read the books about what happened with the railway companies in the, in America before they split them all up and broke them all up. These companies were doing things like, hey, we're building a new railway through here, and your town is kind of close to where we want to put it. Now, we can either skip your town entirely, or we can, put the train right through your town. And here's what we want from you. And you're like, this is highway robbery. And it's like, I don't care. This is, you're gonna pay this, or you're gonna starve to death. And like that's just the way that some of these companies have operated. That's why you have antitrust. That's why in a limited capacity, government intervention into things like, when you're controlling the entire marketplace, or when you're causing these issues, you don't want necessarily 100%. There's this little tightrope you have to walk. Free market, 100% free market without any labor laws or controls is going to result in, well, slavery. I mean, that's a way that there's some people that are more than willing. I mean, big people in the past have been more than willing to do that kind of stuff. You have the mafia, who is more than interested in, killing all of their competition, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Is that a little bit ridiculous and crazy? You think so if you live in, quote unquote, the first world. But if you go over to anywhere else, I mean, you look at some of these companies that, and I kind of want to list a whole bunch of company names off, but I don't want to get in too much trouble.
Should probably keep a lid
but
on
there
that,
there are companies that use child labor overseas, and
and we've been hearing about we've been hearing about these for decades,
for ages, for decades and decades and decades and decades.
It seems so foreign and bizarre.
So it's and I'm not saying that this is a really good thing. South Korea is a great example. You look at South Korea, how they've evolved over the last 50 years. 50 years ago, they were all working like sweat factory jobs, and 50 years later, it's one of the wealthiest countries in the world. So again, it's like, I'm not crapping on free market or any of this kind of stuff, or even cheap labor, because if you read into South Korea, it's very fascinating. I've worked with a lot of game devs from South Korea, and they say the same thing. It's like, my grandfather was like he was a farmer, and he farmed 16 hours a day, and my grandmother, when she wasn't making food and raising the kids, she was walking around picking up sticks and trying to sell the sticks for a few pennies for fuel for people to burn in their home and stuff like that. And my father started selling got a bit of an education and started selling cars and stuff. and then I am working and as one of these chief officers in this digital company that makes, you know, video games or cell phones or security software, stuff like that. That's how quickly they went from this like basically third world country to a place where they have, you know, they have more modern convenience there. One of my buddies in Seoul, I talked to him. I'm like, yeah, I just got my new cell phone and it's great because it's like 4G. And he's like, dude, we're at like 13G over here. We're like, what are you talking about? You know, and so that's like, you know, very complicated issue. I'm not doing it any justice, and I'm so totally getting off topic here.
Yeah,
but
we should bring it around
overall,
back. But...
I'm bringing it back to the fact that you don't necessarily want to cause too much of division in these companies, but at the same time, it's like there's writing on the wall that Blizzard and Activision and Bungie were headed towards a cliff, and Bungie said, "We got to get out of this," and they pulled the drawstring to get out of it, and then to move away from that kind of stuff. And then Activision realizes that they're in big trouble. EA realizes that they're in big trouble. Ubisoft, to some degree, has also been on this for a while now too. They thought they were going to run the market. They thought they were going to run all of their competition out of the industry. You know, they looked with disdain at CD Projekt Red. They look at disdain at these other companies. Why do you think it's been so difficult for Obsidian to get, you know, proper funding for any of their games? They've been begging for a chance from all of these big companies for a long time, and every time they were told, you know, well, are you gonna let us do microtransactions up the butt? And they say no. They go, well, you're not, you know, well, we'll take over your corpse once it dies out. Again, apologies for being long-winded on this stuff, but it's a big, complicated thing. It's not just this small little thing here and you know, EA here and Activision there. It's not just that stuff. This is a big beast, and it's multifaceted. And there's lots of these bigger companies that are doing really bad decisions because they can see the cheap buck. They get analysts to tell them, and I've had this same thing. I've had people come up, what's the cheapest, most cost-effective thing I can do in this scenario that will be enough for me to do what I need to do? And I don't talk a lot about my other job, but because of obvious, well, first of all, some security stuff, and then also like safety stuff and whatnot, and it's like, look, you do this cheaply, you're going to get somebody killed. Or you're going to lose a lot of data, and you're going to lose a lot of things, and you're going to end up getting yourself into a wall. Like driving yourself into a wall, at, you know, brick wall at you know, 50 miles an hour. It's like, this is not going to end well if you try to do the cheapest, most ineffective thing. You know what? I don't want to hear this from you. I'm going to hire somebody else who's going to tell me what they want to.
I'm going to hire someone to tell me that the sky is green, and we'll go with that.
Yeah.
And there's going to be somebody out there who's willing to tell you the sky is green. Absolutely. If you pay them to. So that's how it works, but not necessarily good for the long run.
So did I see this coming? Yes, I've been seeing this coming for a long time. Mm-hmm. EA, I will be very surprised if EA, Activision, and Bungie, sorry, not Bungie, Ubisoft. I'll be very surprised if all of these companies are around in 10 years. I will be very shocked if any of them manage to claw out from where they are. They're big companies. They have a lot of controlling interest. There's a lot of potential people that could turn the ship around, so to speak. There's lots of stuff like that going on. So it's not like 100%, but when it comes to Activision and EA especially, I'll be really shocked if they live another 10 years. I really will be. Speaking
of EA, someone was commenting in the chat earlier about them refusing legitimate refunds. Apparently this is in the news. Young Yaya was covering it or something. I don't know anything about that. If you...
Yeah. It's basically, it's like, I mean, that's just the way that EA has been for a long time now. And there's, you know, they're not the only ones who pull these kinds of tricks from time to time. where they're like, okay, here's our rules for exchanging or refunding a game. Somebody does all of those things, and they say, oh, sorry, can't do that. But it's, again, this is not new.
No.
It was an old, constant running joke. I mean, it's been made fun of in so many movies that the insurance companies and the banks were basically exactly like this for a really, really long time.
You did not buy refund insurance.
Yeah.
Okay, we are working on a comedy sketch making fun of Activision and their whole red dot, selling you a red dot for microtransaction. I was hoping to have it out this week, but we hit some technical snags.
Yeah.
I had to redub my entire set of lines because I had a technical
It's really
problem.
funny.
I also had, it took longer than anticipated to deprocess Saib's voice to remove all the filters that make him sound human and revert him back to the true computer voice that he actually is. So anyway, hopefully we have that coming your way very soon. It's been a lot of fun to make, but man, I've hit every possible technical snag in putting that together. So hopefully everyone remembers the whole red dot fiasco when that comes out, because it kind of centers around that. Anyway, we love seeing all of the conversation in the live chat. If you want to keep the conversation going after the live broadcast, we welcome you to join our Discord community. You can find the link in the description below. It's a place where you can chat with us and other Triple S fans about all the things we love to talk about, stay up to date about everything we're doing here at the Triple S League. Click the link below to join, and be sure to say hi to us in the welcome channel. Yeah, it's because you didn't pre-order the red dot. No refund for you. All right. So on to happier things. So we've been keeping a close eye on the the CD Projekt Red and the Cyberpunk 2077 Twitter accounts. Yesterday was 1 year since the beep tweet, which is hard to believe. I can't believe it's been a year since that came out. We did our reaction videos to it, etc. Just refreshing the Twitter feed right now. Nothing new on Cyberpunk 2077, even in their replies. But I'm not the only one who thinks they're being suspiciously quiet, and some people have spoken up about it on Twitter and are getting very coy responses with memes and stuff in reply. So it's interesting. It looks like
they've been memeing it up, which is always good. It's always a sign that CDPR is preparing something when they start using way more memes than normal. So two quick things that they definitely confirmed is, like, again, I don't know why this constantly is a thing, and I keep thinking to myself, should we be covering this stuff more often? So shocker for all of you who are listening, Cyberpunk 2077 will be coming to PC. I know this is shocking, and you've never heard this before, but it is in fact coming to the PC as well as to the new as well as to consoles.
That's
I know.
Is that really something people are wondering about?
But again, it's like I have to remind myself that there's a lot of people out there who don't consume who don't consume information constantly, and also who don't have a memory that goes back for years. So yes, that is a thing that was definitely confirmed. It's coming out for the PC yet again.
There's I doubt anybody listening to this was wondering about that, but yeah, it is definitely coming for PC. But there's more.
Yes, lots more. More.
Oh, am I doing the more, or are you doing the more?
You do the more.
Okay, well, there is a couple of things. There's some information about flying cars, which I'm going to let Saib do that one. Actually, I'm going to let Saib do all of this because he's the one who brought this info, but I'll introduce it. We are also seeing more evidence of a 2019 release for Cyberpunk 2077. Now, caveat, as usual, we're not declaring, we are not saying with 100% certainty this game is coming in 2019. But there have been some good signs pointing to it coming in 2019. And we mentioned the analyst, the financial analyst who pointed out this would be the ideal time for it to come out. Plus, there's some other stuff which Saib will get into now.
So this is where you have to kind of kind of bear with us. So you have to understand that there is a significant difference between the way that some information is put out versus other ways that information is put out. So in the industry that is games and game media and all this kind of stuff, there's lots of people who know people who can say certain things or see certain trends coming that can, kind of more or less start to affect how some people perceive what's kind of going on, and how this more or less affects the overall, like, kind of like the pulse of the industry. So the more people know something and can't talk about it, the easier it is to pick it out from random tidbits of information. It's how a lot of us analysts do some of our work. So
kind of like how Borderlands 3 was suddenly scrubbed from all of the LinkedIn accounts, like we talked about a few weeks ago.
Yeah,
it's kind of kind of announcing it by omission.
Yeah. So the other thing that can kind of happen is, like, that a company's in trouble when all of their board members and all of the employees within a studio suddenly dump like 90% of their stock onto the market. It's like, if that happens, there's a good chance that there's something going wrong at the company. So much so that there's actually laws against doing this. So, it's like I said, it's the pulse of the thing, and if you spend your entire life like monitoring this stuff, you kind of start to see it coming. So we're hearing more and more from more and more articles, from more and more connected people, from more and more connected analysts, from more and more connected reporters, that we're really starting to think that Cyberpunk is going to be out this year. And why we see that is we see that they're starting to make waves in certain communities. There's some deals being made with certain advertising companies for certain media things, and while there's no open talk about this going on, we know that it's going on. You don't buy $10 million worth of advertising and nobody notices. That just doesn't work that way. So there's certain steps that are starting to happen and starting to take root. There's certain things being set up. Now, that's just the preliminary stuff. Can it be delayed? Of course it can be delayed. And especially with CDPR, they're going to make sure that the product is good and ready and finished. Their aim right now, as we've said numerous times before, is definitely a fall release this year. It makes the most amount of sense. It is the best time to release. It's the guarantee to get them the most money, is to release fall 2019. If they waited until spring 2019, they wouldn't make as much. It would be pretty close, but they'd still be down a little bit more than they would want to be.
You mean spring of 2020?
Oh, sorry, yeah, spring of 2020.
The following spring, yeah.
Yes, the following spring after the fall of 2019. So if they were to release in the summer, obviously they're not going to nearly make as much money as if they would release in the spring or the fall. And if they release it in the fall of 2020, there's certain things that are kind of like up in the air that may or may not completely crush what their suspected rate of gain would be if they were able to release it in 2019. So among that being is the new consoles. As much as you say, oh, but it's great if they launch with a new console. We've talked about this before. If they release with a new console, it is not you, the gamer, who previously bought. So they come out this year, right? Follow me very carefully. I'm going to do this as logically as it can. CDPR puts out Cyberpunk 2077 in 2019. And then in 2020, the consoles come out and they say, hey, get the Cyberpunk 2077 with your purchase of any console. Any of the new consoles. Either of the new consoles comes out, you can get it and you can play it on there. You'll have a lot of people who will jump at that, and how many people are going to be upset that they have to buy the game twice? They're not, because it's going to be bundled.
So it's built right into the cost of the console. You don't even notice it.
Yes.
So yeah,
the people who are covering the cost, who are handing money over to CDPR to make this happen, is the console owners, the company owners, Sony and Microsoft, are handing them millions and millions and millions of dollars to be able to launch their game on their title, bundled with one or two other games to show off their stuff. In a perfect world, what will probably happen is that Sony will bundle it with one of their with probably two games that are exclusive to their console, and also if Cyberpunk 2077 is a big hit, they will put that in there as well with an upgraded version with maybe some specialized content, maybe a new character or something like that that they've managed to shoehorn in there. And then the Xbox will get the exact same deal.
right.
And that is the way that it would work. How many times are you buying the game? Once.
Right.
How many times how many times is CDPR getting paid for that game? Now, there's some people out there who go say, but the consoles aren't out until 2022. They're not out in 2020. They're not out in 2021. They're out in 2022. You're an idiot. I'm sorry. You're an idiot. You can't have this console generation go on for another 3 years. It's just not going to work. You have the newest ray tracing. You have all this new technology coming out that is already available for the PC. You're going to tell me that they're going to wait 3 years in an industry where console sales are on the decline and PC ownership is on the decline for consoles. That means fewer people are interested when they're playing games, are interested in getting consoles, whereas more and more people, especially in Asia, are going out to buy computers to play games on. PCs, desktop computers are through the roof in sales all over the world, especially in Asia, especially in Japan. Japan console gaming is, and it's not just because it's the end of the cycle and everybody already owns a PlayStation. It's that they want more than what the consoles can offer. And the only way that the consoles are going to be able to fight this is to keep up on the technological wave and also offer new stuff. You cannot have another 2 to 3 years of sitting around doing nothing, because you're not going to market these things. You're not going to sell these things in the beginning of the year. You're going to sell them at the end of the year. So we're talking about the end of 2022. Are you kidding? Like, good Lord, that's 3, almost 4 years away. You think that you're going to be playing the latest versions of the PlayStation and the Xbox? You think those things are going to be playing for another 3 years? Are you crazy? Like, no, especially not with the new technology that's there. Obviously, some of these announcements happen to coincide with the way that certain deals were struck with some of these companies to get contracts for Sony and the Xbox, which means that they knew this stuff was coming and are building their tech around it, and we're going to see this out most likely next year. Like unless there's some major upheaval, we're going to see both new consoles next year, and this just coincides with the timing. Mm-hmm. Basically, because you get a sneak peek or a mention of the new console at E3 1 year. The second year, you get the exposure, and then the console's out within the next 8 months. That's typically how it works. Like that's just the way that it's always been working. So yeah.
But yeah, so the way that results in CD Projekt Red making the most money from this is with that dual release, like you talked about, with the releasing it for current consoles and then having it bundled with the next generation of consoles. Someone asked, where is it here?
There is still a small chance that they may decide to, if the consoles are delayed to 2021, then they might push it over to next year, and that might work out quite well for them. But most likely, we're expecting the new console sometime next year or the year after, at the very least. So we're expecting this game to drop within the next 12 months, basically. So they could release it in March next year. That's little bit more than a year
It could
away.
happen. Again, there are no guarantees, plus delays
Yeah.
happen, plus CD Projekt Red has said repeatedly, we will release it when it's ready.
Yeah, when it's ready to go.
And they're sitting on big wads of cash and can probably, they'll take as long as they need
They can
to.
afford it. They can afford it. They can afford to do that. They can afford to anticipate that kind of change there. So, so that's what we're seeing, and we're seeing more and more and more and more of this start to be echoed by the community, by professionals in the community. They don't echo that kind of stuff unless they're starting to get kind of a good feeling for it. I mean, it's not just yes, it's not public out there everywhere yet, but it's starting to become kind of a okay, we see what you're putting down. We get it. We're moving in that direction, and that's what you're starting to see more and more and more of. Yeah. So
I'm just gonna refresh the Twitter feed here, just in case. No, nothing yet. Okay.
Okay. So the other thing that kind of that they kind of confirmed is that flying cars are definitely a thing in the game. You cannot control flying cars. Again, they've confirmed this once again.
And now, why is this? Now, you explained it to me in a text message, and I didn't.
Yeah.
I was like, I couldn't tell if you were joking or not.
Okay, so the same reason why you're not allowed to control a flying car in Cyberpunk 2077 is the same reason why when flying cars come out in our real life, why you're not going to be able to get behind the controls and fly it yourself, is because they don't give the ability to flying death machines to a bunch of children. Meaning that they're not going to be dumb enough. Nobody is in any kind of a world that you can see in the future or now or later. You're not going to give a car that can accidentally fly into the side of a office building and tear through a boardroom full of executives. You're not going to give that ability to the random 16-year-old who just got their license. Did not ever going to happen in our reality or in the reality of this. So, which means that basically the idea is that there's no way that a city like there's no way Night City in the future would let. Now, sure, you could do it illegally, but legally speaking, flying cars are not going to have the same control, whereas your car on the ground is. Your car on the ground is restricted to roads. There's barriers. You get in an accident, that's on you. There's insurance for that kind of stuff. You're only traveling, usually around 60 miles an hour.
Right.
One thing you are not doing for sure is flying that over top of, say, a fuel plant or a fuel station, or, like I said, flying it past the boardroom executives of some big company. Only a computer that's connected to a lot of other computers and there's lots of secondary safety backups is going to allow that flight to happen within the city limits. Right now in Tokyo and Kyoto, I believe, they're starting to plan for flying cars, and the flying cars are really basic. You get in one building, you pay, or you've already paid it through the app or whatever. The thing will then take off without a pilot and fly a predefined route over to where you're wanting to go, land, and will open the doors and you walk out. That's how the system is being set up right now. And it makes sense in the game that you're not going to be able to control. Now, there might be a cutscene or two where you can, hack into a vehicle and fly, but the minute that you do that, the minute that a car suddenly goes off the preordained path, or the moment somebody starts messing with the controls or starts to try and hack into a thing, the immediate response to that is going to probably be a military fighter with a missile. That's usually how they're probably going to fix that problem. That's what they're talking about with. They're designing counter drones for all those little drones that people are working with either these capture nets or where they just they basically they hit it with enough firepower to make it break into 100 tiny little pieces so that you don't have large bits of, the drone landing on, kids, walking down the street, right? Because this whole drone thing is starting to become more and more of a problem. So that's the way that it's been written into the world and into the universe, is that, look, not to mention that it's really hard. If we give you unlimited flying, you're going to run into a lot of issues within the game. There's going to be a lot of problems within the game that you're going to have to account for, and it's easier if you can put those flying things on rails so that you limit that kind of a thing. The same thing happened in WoW and happened in a ton of other MMOs, where it's like the minute the developers give you flying, it opens up a whole new can of worms.
Well, it's just too bad, because in the world of Cyberpunk,
yeah,
it just would make so much sense for you to be able to hack a flying car and take it off course and just do whatever the hell you want with it. But I see where the technical limitations come in, but it makes me wonder why they don't just have all the cars be self-driving. Like, wouldn't most of them be self-driving in the...
No, because we run into the same problem in kind of like what we're preparing for to happen here in the future, is that, I mean, anybody can build a moped. I mean, anybody can build a car, or, can take an older car and, put some work into it and get it running again. Pretty much anybody can do that. So there will always be a system for on-the-ground travel with cars and small vehicles. Because, again, it's like, you can make a self-propelled vehicle with very little effort in today's day and age. It is not difficult to make a car. Now, it's obviously you have to fit certain rules and you have to abide by certain things, and this is all really, really, important, because otherwise you have what happens every once in a while where, somebody doesn't know how to control a car, and you slam into a crowd, or whatever, and that, I mean, you do that as an attack, but that's really bad. But it basically boils down to the thing where it's like cars are really easy to control. They're really easy to create, they're really easy to build, so at some point, at some level, there will always be a car, in the traditional sense of the word.
Yeah, drivable by a person.
Yeah. And so for the most part, that makes a fair amount of sense overall. It's like, that kind of does. So that's more or less kind of where it's at, and what's gone into the thinking behind that. So, of course, there'll be people who go, why can't I fly the car myself? And it's like, well, because you wouldn't be able to fly a car like this. If you were in this world, you wouldn't be able to fly a car like this anyways. Unless you have a very specialized license for it, not going to happen. And that's just, it's kind of a way of keeping the immersion of the game there in a responsible manner that also makes it easier for the devs to do what they want to do. And that makes a lot of sense. So,
plus, as Crazy Joy says, mod idea, take the flying cars off rails, see how it works.
Yes, absolutely.
And last word will go to Blunt Man. This is simply because they don't have phones. Not sure what he's referring to, but it's funny anyway. So, all right. Did you have any last words on this topic, Cyb, or should we wrap it up?
No, I think that's it. That's about all we got today for these two topics. I droned on a little bit. Felt like kind of going into a bit of a rant, but these are both kind of like touchy things. I want to make sure that the message is getting passed as clearly as it can, because I always hate it. We should mention a bit of a story thing that happened last week too, or on Tuesday. So one of the things I hate to see like when things are misunderstood. And we always want to try and avoid that as much as humanly possible. For example, one of the things that in the last episode that there were some comments about is like, Bethesda is a publicly traded company, and no, it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's not. It's not a publicly traded company. There's no index for them. They're not on any publicly traded company. You look up multiple Wikipedia entries about them, multiple company registries. They're 100% a privately owned company. Do they have people that say, hey, I want to invest in your company? Yes, but it's not the same as a publicly traded company. So just wanted to, like, there was some consternation in that in the chat. And that's something that affects certain things within the game. And 100%, no, they are not a publicly traded company. Bethesda is entirely owned. They own themselves. ZeniMax, Bethesda, it's parent-child company, and then a bunch of other sister companies. They are their own thing. They do not have to yield to the qualms of investors. Same thing with NVIDIA. Or sorry, not with NVIDIA in the sense that it's a private company. NVIDIA is a public company. But NVIDIA they sit on a pile of their own cash so that they can do things the way that they want. So yes, they can get, when their stock takes a big dive and there's some issues and some goings on, they never have to worry too much because they've got enough operating expenses to keep on going forever, or they can just pay out dividends and shut up their stockholders. See, as a stock investor, I don't care what my stock is worth. I care about unless I'm just buying and selling. But if I'm a long-term investor, I'm more interested in dividends. If I buy into a stock at $100 a stock and it drops down to $10 a stock, I would be very upset if I was planning on selling it. But if for between now and the next 10 years, I'm going to be getting 10 grand from them every year via dividends, I suddenly don't care about the stock price. I only care about the stock price when I'm selling the stock. I care about the stock price when it's being sold, or when I'm buying it. I do not care about it in the least when I'm getting dividends from the company. And that's how a majority of long-term stock play works out. There's always going to be ups and downs and all this kind of stuff, and NVIDIA and some of these other tech companies know that all too well. And companies who rely more on their stock price than anything else, aka Apple, aka Facebook, aka Twitter, aka all these companies, suddenly they're in hot water because they don't keep money in the bank. They don't keep a mountain of cash under them that they can suddenly, when crap hits the fan, they can say, oh, we're going to fix this, turn it around, get it through, it'll all be done, blah, blah, blah. It's all good. Yeah, so just as a heads up, Bethesda is not owned by another company, which means that this whole thing with 76 is not impacting them as much as a lot of people think it is. A lot of people are saying this is going to destroy the company. No, it's really not. This certainly hurt their reputation, and they are very, very keenly aware of that. Very, very much so. They are not in any way, shape, or form on the edge of their seat because they're going to run out of money tomorrow. They're not. They have an enormous amount of money in the bank. They can operate themselves for years, and this is their MO. This is what they've always been doing. They make a game, they put it out, they get a massive amount of sales, they put the money in the bank, and then they keep on working on the new game. Like right now they've been operating under, it's what? It's 2019 now. 2011 is when Skyrim came out. They're operating under the bulk sales of the release of Skyrim today. It's like, geez, guys, like seriously, they have all of the extra releases of Skyrim. They have Fallout 4 before they even have to, that they can live off of that stuff. And Fallout 4 sold like 10 times the amount that Skyrim did. So just as a heads up, it's like, yo, they can live for a long time and not put anything out ever, because that's just the way that they've rigged themselves. Whereas other companies that require that money, Telltale, if they don't secure that next funding in the next 2 months, they're closed up shop in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's kind of what that's going on. So somehow that didn't get quite clearly said. I'm saying it now again so that everybody, figures it out. So.
All right, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Thank you so much, everybody, for supporting this show and for the great conversation in the chat. Don't forget to slam that like button before you leave, before you close your browser or your app that you're listening to this on. I also want to thank our Patreon supporters, Old Man Manson, and our 2 anonymous supporters. Don't forget to like. I already said that, but also sub if you appreciate this content, want to catch the podcast twice a week here on the Triple S League. If you're listening after the fact on SoundCloud or iTunes, we thank you for subscribing and reviewing, following, liking, and whatever you do on those platforms. And feel free to join us on Tuesday at noon Pacific Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time for the live show where you can interact with us and other listeners and be a part of the discussion. The Augmented Reality Podcast is a presentation of the Triple S League. Check out our YouTube channel for game guides, reviews, comedy, news updates, and tons more quality gaming content. My name is Ashton Inity, and on behalf of Cyberpunk, thank you all so much for listening. We'll talk to you on Tuesday. Might have more videos out before then. Not 100% sure, but we always try to deliver the quality content to you all. So thank you so much for your support of this show, and we'll talk to you all soon. Take care. Have a great weekend.